Rich, thank you so much. And I was sure enjoying the music on the video that led up to the beginning of the conference. That's probably much more entertaining than I'm going to be. So it's an honor to be with you this evening. And as Rich said, my name is Patrick Cudney. I'm Rich. I'm the acting director for MSU Extension as of 3 days ago. So my day job is I'm the associate director for MSU Extension, and I've been with Extension approaching 25 years. Most of that career was spent out in the field from northern lower Michigan, where I'm from. And I spent 18 years started as a county agent in various roles in northern Michigan until I was asked about 7 years ago to take on the associate director role. And then recently, Dr. Dwyer has moved into his sabbatical year, and I was asked to be the acting director for a period of time. So again, it's just an honor to be here. And this is going to be fun. Rich and the team had asked me if I could provide a bit of an overview and a history of the nation's premier land grant institution, Michigan State University, and look at the beginning, look at where we started, talk a bit about that history, talk about the history of the College of Agriculture and Natural Resources and our work, and really what's been foundational to the success of this institution for a very, very long time. So Shelby, I'm going to attempt to share my screen. And I need to start my slideshow. And Shelby, could you let me know, can you see my slideshow?
I sure can, Patrick. You're all set.
All right, wonderful. So I haven't screwed up so far. So welcome to the conference. I'd like to begin by talking about the history of Michigan State University, but it would be irresponsible for me to talk about that history and not mention that we fully understand the history of the land grant university and the land that Michigan State University occupies. So we have a long-standing relationship historically to the land and certainly the native peoples where this land came from and their ancestors who still reside here. So we want to offer a land acknowledgement to begin the presentation today. And this is just one way that we recognize this legacy and expand our conversations around diversity, equity, and inclusion. The boundaries of the state of Michigan resulted from several land cessions from 1807 through 1842. And during that time, native peoples were forcibly removed from their land. The 1819 Treaty of Saginaw resulted in the cessation of land that is now where the campus of Michigan State University resides in East Lansing. Later in my presentation, I'll talk about the Morrill Act of 1862, which is an amazing visionary congressional act. And also it was difficult for many native peoples. The Morrill Act of 1862, which enabled the establishment of the United States land grant colleges, there were 17 million acres that were ceded from native peoples across this nation. This land was ceded to states and territories to form colleges that focused on practical agriculture, science, and engineering education. So I wanted to begin with that land acknowledgement and that bit of history. I now want to talk about an idea that began back in 1849. And for about 5 years, leaders within the Michigan Agricultural Society championed the need for an agricultural college for the state of Michigan. In 1849, the Honorable E.H. Lathrop, who actually coordinated the state fair at the time, proclaimed that we dot our land with seminaries of law, of medicine, and theology, but agriculture as yet has no seminary in which to teach her sons the most valuable of all arts. So if you think back or follow your history, we were an agrarian society. Most of the nation, and certainly Michigan, resided on farms, generational farms. Families handed seeds down. These thoughts and these ideas about the science of agriculture really began here in Michigan, began by these leaders within our own agricultural society who started talking about the need for an agricultural college. Michigan Lieutenant Governor at the time, William Fenton, pleaded for education in the science and practice of Agriculture. In 1850, in fact, on January 1st, 1850, the Michigan Agricultural Society's Executive Committee submitted a memorandum to the Michigan legislature that called for education, it called for the president of the society, Joseph Williams, to call on the state's legislature to establish a College of Agriculture in the science and practice of agriculture. Joseph Williams was the president of the Agricultural Society at that time, and he would become Michigan State's first president. And he was also a member of that state's 1850 Constitutional Convention, which led the efforts to embed an agricultural college into the state's constitution. When we think about planting the seed of the land grant concept that ultimately led to the Morrill Act, it was later in 1850 that the Michigan State Legislature, the first state legislature in the country, passed a joint resolution asking the United States Congress for a gift of 300,000 acres of land to support an agricultural school in Michigan. Congress did not take action. Again, this was in 1850. Congress did not take action then, but this was the precursor for the Morrill Act, which 12 years later would give each state in the country, in the Union, 30,000 acres of land for each senator and representative in Congress for the support of schools of agriculture and mechanical arts in each of those respective states and territories. So the passage of the Morrill Act in 1862 led to 240,000 acres of federal land that in Michigan was primarily located in northern Michigan to be sold, and the proceeds of that sale funded the Agricultural College for the state of Michigan. Again, that was in 1850. And in 1862 is when the actual Morrill Act was passed, but it began in Michigan many, many years before. In fact, in 1852, the Michigan Agricultural Society presented another memorandum to the state legislature, praying for the establishment of a state agricultural school. And as the idea of an agricultural school was discussed, the question arose, should it be under the direction of the university in Ann Arbor or the state normal school in Ypsilanti, which was a state school that taught teachers? So the University of Michigan was the only university in Michigan at the time. And it was not college for the common person. Again, we were an agrarian society. The University of Michigan, a wonderful institution, trained doctors and trained lawyers. And there was a movement at the time to have the agricultural school established underneath the University of Michigan, or even considered as part of the normal school, which was a campus of the University of Michigan in Ypsilanti that trained teachers. John C. Holmes argued for a standalone agricultural college. And we have Holmes Hall on campus named after John C. Holmes. The normal school and the University of Michigan both opposed this idea of a standalone institution. Both institutions argued that they would offer a superior education at less cost. And it was argued by Holmes and other visionary leaders in Michigan that the focus would not be in the intended area of agriculture and mechanical arts. This was followed in 1855 by the governor at the time, Kinsley Bingham, signing Public Act number 130, which created the agricultural school for the state of Michigan. Took a few years to build some buildings and to get things moving here at Michigan Agricultural School, but on May 14th, 1857, 5 faculty members taught 63 students in 3 now non-existent buildings. College Hall was the first one. This was the instruction hall. And then there was Saints Rest, which was the dormitory, and there was a brick horse barn. MSU was the first institution of higher learning in the United States to teach scientific agriculture. In 1862, President Abraham Lincoln signed the Land Grant Morrill Act. And what's interesting about that is even though the foundation, the concept, the idea was born here in Michigan by our agricultural leaders and the Agricultural Society at that time, it actually was Senator Morrill, who actually started the legislation that formed the land grant university system. And Senator Morrill was from Vermont. There were lobbyists. There were what we would now call lobbyists. They were residents of the state of Michigan, the Ag Society, that traveled to our nation's capital and lobbied senators for the passage of the Morrill Act. And it was the senator for Vermont that took up that torch. They moved the legislation through the Congress, and in 1862, the president, that was Abraham Lincoln, signed the Morrill Land Grant Act. Michigan State University became the nation's premier land grant university and a prototype for the entire land grant system. Again, as I said earlier, the act granted lands to each loyal state to support a college where the leading object shall be, without excluding other scientific and classical studies and including military tactics, to teach such branches of learning that are related to agriculture and the mechanical arts. And this is a picture of Saints Rest, the dormitory that was built to house students and a few classes, is my understanding. In 1870, the first female students enrolled at Michigan Agricultural College. And this is, again, from MSU archives, where a number of these photos come from. And this photo is actually of the first women's academic group, which predated professional sororities, which began later in 1941. In 1876, the first farmers' institutes were held in Michigan. And in 1887, the Federal Hatch Act was passed to provide for agricultural research stations in each state, as officials recognized that research and the generation of new knowledge was essential for the education of farmers and for rural peoples. It also, around 1887, 1888, some of you may recognize this name, William J. Beall. Again, we have a number of buildings named after Dr. Beall. He was the father of hybrid corn. And as I said earlier, families, communities, generation saved seeds and passed them down generationally. When hybrid corn was developed, it was the first example of the science of agriculture in developing hybrid corn, and the farmers wouldn't plant it. They were not interested in planting it because they had their own seeds. So that became the beginning of what is now 4-H through corn clubs, because Dr. Beall and other leaders at the university shared the seeds with young people and asked them to take them and plant them on their farms and distributed these seeds. And once their families saw how well that hybrid corn did in comparison to their family seeds that they saved and in comparison to those corn crops, they were very interested at that point in planting hybrid corn. And that actually was the precursor to 4-H clubs and corn clubs across the state and then beyond. In 1888, the Michigan Agricultural Experiment Station, now known as Ag Bio Research, was established at the Michigan Agricultural College. In 1890, the second Morrill Act was passed, and it established what is now referred to as historically Black land grant colleges and university. Here's a photo or a picture of Prairie View A&M, which is in Texas, and it's one of the 57 historically Black public universities or colleges in the United States. Michigan does not have an HBCU, an historically Black college or university. Ohio, to our south, is the furthest north state that has an HBSU. Michigan does not. Following that act in 1911, the first farm bureau in the nation was established in Broome County, New York. Farm Bureau would be a driving force in the establishment of the Extension Service and support for applied research in education. In fact, in Michigan, it was leaders within Michigan Agricultural College that first worked with the Michigan Agricultural Society in county-based meetings, which were the beginning and ultimately became Farm Bureau and county farm bureaus in Michigan, which relates back again to the impact of this land grant institution and these visionary leaders and educators that were part of this movement here in Michigan. In 1912, federal funds were allocated for demonstrations and fostered cooperative efforts between the United States Department of Agriculture land grant colleges, and individual counties. And in extension, we like to tell the story of Harvey G. Smith. Harvey in 1912 was our first county agent, and he was hired and worked in what was then known as Alpena County. And of course, we still have Alpena County in northeast lower Michigan, but Alpena County was larger in 1912, and it encompassed portions of what is now Montmorency County and also Presque Isle County. So Harvey G. Smith led the way for the establishment of the first county agents across the state. I want to spend a little bit of time on a name that probably most of you recognize, and that's Seaman Knapp, a physician, a college instructor, and later an administrator who really moved to agriculture and took up farming later in life, where he had a farm in Iowa where he raised crops and livestock. The first seeds of what would later become an abiding interest in farm demonstration were planted after he became active in an organization called the Teachers of Agriculture. And he attended their meetings at the Michigan Agricultural College in 1881. And he attended more meetings at the Iowa Agricultural College in 1882. Seaman Knapp was so impressed with his teaching method. As a legislator, as he also was, he drafted a bill for the establishment of these experimental research stations, which was later introduced to the 47th Congress and laid the foundation for a nationwide network of agricultural experiment stations at the land grant institutions. And based on his own experience, Knapp was convinced that demonstrations carried out by farmers themselves were the most effective way to disseminate good farming methods. And his efforts were aided by the onslaught of the boll weevil at the time, because Mr. Knapp also had a farm in Louisiana. And it was a voracious cotton pest whose presence was not felt in only the South, but throughout all of the South. Damage associated with this pest instilled fear among merchants and growers that the cotton economy would disintegrate around them. In the view of many, a farm demonstration at the Walter J. Porter Farm, which is now a National Historic Landmark in Terrell, Texas, that was set up by the United States Department of Agriculture at the urging of concerned merchants and growers, was the first in a series of steps that led to the passage of the legislation that formalized cooperative extension work. So those of us in extension, we look at Seaman Knapp as the father of cooperative extension. And this new concept was born. With the Smith-Lever Act in 1914, the federal government and states would cooperatively support educational outreach through the United States Department of Agriculture, the State Land Grant College and University, and local government. The Smith-Lever Act is a United States federal law that established a system of cooperative extension services connected to the land grant universities in order to inform people of current developments in agriculture, home economics, public policy and government, leadership, 4-H youth development, economic development, and coastal issues, which is now known as the National Sea Grant College Program. And it helped farmers and communities learn from these new agricultural techniques that were developed through the experiment stations at these land grant institutions and by introducing them through methods of home-based instruction. The third and final Morrill Act is much more recent. In 1994, the third Morrill Act passed establishing tribal land grant colleges. What was different with that third act is it was not a gift of land, but a gift of money to tribal nations across the country in the support and establishment of tribal colleges. In fact, you might not know this. Michigan has 4 land grant institutions. We at Michigan State University are the 1862 land grant, and we have 3 1994 land grants. Our partners at Bay Mills Community College, which is located up in Brimley on the shores of Lake Superior, our friends and colleagues at the Keweenaw Bay Ojibwe Community College, located in Baraga County in Lance, again up in the Western Upper Peninsula, and the Saginaw Chippewa Tribal College, located just north of us in Mount Pleasant. These are also land grant colleges within the state of Michigan, and we actively partner with them to share their indigenous local knowledge, to share with our broader land-grant institution. We work collectively together, and in fact, we have developed the Michigan Intertribal Land Grant Extension System, where the vast resources of Michigan State University and Michigan State University Extension can be partnered with the indigenous knowledge and the resources that these 3 tribal land grant colleges bring to this partnership. And we're very excited about that work. Rich, I'm checking my clock. I think I'm doing okay here. The next graph just gives you some full detail into what are 111 land grant colleges and universities across the entire country. This was developed through a USDA report that was commissioned in 1995, and it does include our 1994 tribal land grant partners. And again, you can see a bit of a history of the Morrill Act of 1862, the second Morrill Act, and then what is called the Equity and Educational Land Grant Status Act. That's the tribal land grant that I just talked about a minute ago. It references the Hatch Act and the Smith-Lever Act, which was the foundational legislation, which takes the knowledge that's developed at these land grant institutions and makes this knowledge available across the states and territories that the land grant university system serves. Michigan State University was established in 1855, and by 1862, it stood as the nation's premier land grant university. Over the decades, the university has continued to be a model of what a land grant university can and should do. As a university of, for, and by the people, Michigan State University began a long tradition of empowering people through educational opportunity. Currently, Michigan State University is the nation's premier land grant university and one of the top research institutions in the world. Our over 200 academic programs, with 36 of them ranked in the top 25 nationally. We're number 32 in top public university rankings and a top 100 global university. We have a gold sustainability rating, and we're number 1 in nuclear science graduation programs. I also wanted to highlight within our college, the College of Agriculture and Natural Resources, one of 16 colleges and the founding college that started this whole university. Our Ag Bioresearch and MSU Extension portfolio is number 1 in USDA, National Institute of Food and Agriculture funding in the region, and we're ranked 3 nationally in competitive grants in support of agriculture and natural resources. It's something we're very, very proud of. Our top ranked programs, our high caliber opportunities, and an inclusive collaborative community enable our Spartan students to create powerful, personalized paths and to compete with the best in the world. This university went through 5 name changes, and you may have heard me touch on a few of them briefly in my presentation. We started off in 1855 as the Agricultural College for the state of Michigan, and that was changed in 1861 to the State Agricultural College. And then in 1909, the name was changed to the Michigan Agricultural College, or MAC. You may have noticed we still have some logo wear, we have some shirts that can be purchased, and sometimes the MSU Spartan men's basketball team will wear MAC throwback jerseys, and that we were the Michigan Agricultural College. And in 1955, we became the Michigan State University Agriculture and Applied Science was the name of this university until in 1964, the name changed to Michigan State University as it is today. Another little bit of anecdotal information, and I'm not sure, Shelby, if people can type an answer into the chat, but I don't have a prize. If I was there live and we could be doing this in person, it's a fun little game to play. But I wonder if people knew the first mascot that Michigan Agricultural College had, because it was about that time we started having some of the athletic programs, and Michigan Agricultural College had a mascot. Does anyone know what that is? Maybe Rich, I'll put you on the spot. You know what the first mascot was?
I do have the chat open for answers, Pat.
All right. Is anybody replying?
I haven't seen one just yet.
All right, well here, drum roll please. We were the Aggies. as many of our land grant colleges and partners still have Aggies in as their school's mascot, but we were the Michigan Agricultural College Aggies.
Awesome.
So this was fun, Rich. Thank you so much for the opportunity. I believe I stayed on time. And Michigan State University and the agricultural experiment stations are an essential part of Michigan State University and in service to our communities across the state. We are now an organization, MSU Extension has over 600 faculty and staff that live and work in every county in the state. All of Michigan's 83 counties, I'm sorry, except one, Keweenaw County, up in the Copper Country. Keweenaw County certainly benefits from our programs, and Keweenaw County contributes an investment to the partnership that is MSU Extension, but they share an office in Houghton County. So we have our faculty and staff. I don't think we have anybody living in the Keweenaw, but live and work in all 83 counties and live in 82 counties. Agricultural experiment stations, there's 14 outlying research stations across the state, in addition to the campus farms, the South Farms that I think many of you probably know well. We so much appreciate the support from Michigan Agriculture and work very hard to take the research and applied research from this institution and help you. So Rich, with that, I'm glad to take any questions, and it was an honor to be with you this evening.